Welcome back then folks to of course the second build of day 3 in pack number 14 of special projects. This one a few of you will probably have had an inkling it was going to arrive because of course I featured this in my top 15 Volkswagens you've never heard of video alongside, funnily enough, the Golf R GTi. This one of course is a real car though, unlike my fictional version of the HPA from yesterday. It's the Polo R WRC edition, which is, I'm very happy to say, far more than just a couple of stickers on a Polo GTi. It's actually a 220 horsepower Polo, which is pretty badass. Now, in real life, this thing actually has some mixed reviews because it seems to be one of those cars where, at least according to road testers, yes, it has more power, yes, it's quicker, but it doesn't necessarily improve the platform that much, which I find curious. To me, the idea of a 220 horsepower Polo will never not be cool anyway. But as far as the parts go, of course, you can incidentally download via the link in the description, the player's livery that they've done. Of course, a ton of different people have done the Polo R replica. This one, though, I really liked, and it looks good and accurate to real life. As far as the parts, we have the comfort softs already fitted, so for the case of realism, I've decided to leave that as is. Of course, you could go for whatever you want, especially if you're trying to get it up into a different point level, but I'll leave that down to you. We've got sports brake pads. As far as the club sports section, sports brakes and the sports clutch and flywheel. The power restrictor and ballast are fitted as well. For the semi-racing stuff, you want your high RPM turbo, so pretty hefty bit of kit there. As you can see, we don't have exactly 220 horses. That's because, as far as I could see online, it looks like the consensus is more like about 217, so that's about as close as we could get without fitting loads and loads of, just completely unnecessary parts. So if you want to try and get it closer to 220 or 217, I'll leave that up to you, but for now I'm leaving it there. We've got the height adjustable sports suspension, of course the fully customized diff. As far as the racing stuff, of course a racing intercooler is technically overkill for a car like this, but again we're trying to get it to the right power level with as few parts as possible. As far as the other parts there's nothing else fitted. For the extreme stuff, I've got the hydraulic handbrake. You don't need that, of course it's not a drift car, but that's just for the fun of it, and the steering angle adapter to improve the turn-in as well. And as far as the ultimate section, there is nothing fitted. So this is probably one of the cheapest, if not the cheapest, build out of all of the ones that I've done in this particular pack. And as some of you have probably noticed, especially if you've been using special projects since like day 1 or very early, I always like to try and at least throw in like one hot hatch, or at least one like more normal car, like the the little cup cars or a hot hatch of some kind, that kind of thing, just to give it that more grounded feel, so there's something for everyone kind of thing. Now, as far as the upgrades, of course, we've got the sports, or comfort softs, I should say, fitted. For the suspension, I've got 100mm. That sounds very high, but when you look at the car, of course, that looks accurate to real life. 1 degree of anti-roll, or 0.1 I guess, anti-roll, because you can't change that anyway. 25 and 45 on the dampers, 1.85 on the springs, 1 degree of camber on the front, with 0.5 on the back. As far as the toe, I've got none on the front and 20 on the rear, because that's what you've got to work with, and you can't change that. So, thankfully, it's a good handling car anyway. And then as far as the diff, my preference for this one is 1010. I know, especially when it comes to front-wheel drive cars, everyone has their own preference, so of course you could change that if you wanted to, so again, I'll leave it down to you. The transmission being standard, you really don't notice. I did that because, although I could have gone for the manual, 220 horsepower isn't that crazy in comparison to the standard ratios, so I decided to leave it as is, in terms of keeping that kind of realistic feel. As far as the power and the ECU, of course, those are unchanged. 28 kilos of ballast is what I've gone for, and I've put that all the way to the back. It's still a 62-38 split, so definitely very front biased. And the reason why I've gone for exactly 1300 is because when I looked it up online, the quoted weight for this car is all over the place. Some people say 1270, some say 1330, some say 1280, so I've kind of gone for a middle ground there and made it 1300. If somebody has, for example, owned one of these or knows somebody who's parked one on a weighbridge and knows exactly what it weighs, then I would love to hear about it. Otherwise, it seems like a bit of a shot in the dark as far as assuming the actual weight of the vehicle. As far as the downforce, that's as low as possible on the back. And over here, the very few parts which we fitted, of course you can double check to make sure that you have. All in all, 466 points is very modest. For a car that only weighs 1300 kilos and has 216 horsepower, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So, of course, now we'll jump out to the track and I'll show you what the car can do in practice. I always like to, of course, make notes on these vehicles to give you an idea of what to expect or how to use it if it's a more challenging car or something that's a bit weird or oddball. In the case of this one, though, it's actually dead easy because it's a Polo. It's already a really fun, chuckable, great little platform. We've just turned it up to the proverbial 11. With 220 horsepower, I mean, I guess the car in real life must be different to this because I think it's really nice to drive. It does have a little bit of torque steer, especially when exiting corners, but you do have to wonder how much of that is just from being a 220 horsepower front-wheel drive small car with comfort soft tyres. Of course you're going to have an element of that there. It's certainly no Focus RS or no HPA Golf, that's for sure. If you do decide to use it, I don't think this is going to, reinvent the wheel or blow your mind for everyone, but it's one of those builds where it's not supposed to. This is supposed to feel like a grounded car that you could imagine seeing in the game, or maybe if you owned one in real life or know someone who did or drove one, it's like a nice experience to imagine it were in the game. So of course, if you do decide to use this one, I hope you have a ton of fun with it. Maybe you've got a Polo that's not doing anything in your garage. I get the impression that's probably the case for quite a few of us, because I don't see that much love for the Polo in this game, unfortunately. And of course, stick around for the other builds still to come this week, and naturally for the ones which I've already done. But that's it for this build. I'll see you next time, and thanks for watching.